Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to the first volume in my Gittin Good series. I already uploaded kind of an intro, just a quick video to kind of explain what I'm thinking and where my head's at. I think this video constitutes the real beginning of the series, though. I was watching a tournament the other day. It was a tournament in which JeeNiNe had participated. I assume most people here are probably already familiar with JeeNiNe. If not, I'll be sure to include a link to both his Twitch channel as well as his YouTube channel. He is, by any measure, one of the top tourney players around right now. Mostly PS4, although recently he joined PC as well. Just a really amazing player. He has a very distinctive style. I would say he includes maybe more, quote, tech than what other players have included. He does a lot of weapon swapping. He goes after a lot of critical attacks, some parries, some backstabs. Just an all-around really fantastic player. And I was watching this tournament and there were just so many things I saw that jumped out at me. And I thought, it'd be really fun to do kind of a breakdown of at least some elements of the tournament. And I approached JeeNiNe about using the YouTube footage, and he very graciously actually uploaded the raw footage to my Dropbox, so I was able to incorporate it in the video today. So the quality's a lot better. And it was actually kind of a pain in the ass for him because we kept running out of space, so I'd have to download files so he could upload things. And anyway, it was a pain for him, and I'm really grateful that he took the time to upload it. So a big thank you to JeeNiNe, both for the duels themselves and for the effort in uploading the video. I definitely think that even if you're not into dueling, you should give this a watch, or at least go watch the original tournament. I'll include a link to that as well. You can learn an awful lot from watching these guys play. These guys who are playing at tournament level are playing a completely different game than most of us are playing. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you've never fought one of the top players, I really recommend that you try to have an opportunity to do that. You'll see in some of my upcoming videos, I've been doing just that. I've been getting worked, as you might imagine, and I've learned some surprising things about their skill and the way that they approach the game. But I'm hoping you can get some of that. Some of that will come through. Some of it's hard to actually pick up in these tournaments because obviously the players are really good, but their opponents are really good too. And so some of the things that they might do to me or to another player that isn't at that level, they won't risk it because they know the other player is equally capable. But we'll see a lot of interesting things today. So without further ado, let's jump into the actual tournament. So just a really quick disclaimer, I am not a tourney player. I'm nowhere near as good as these guys. So a lot of the analysis that I'm going to provide is somewhat speculative. I obviously don't know exactly what these guys were thinking or what they were trying to accomplish. But let's look at his build. So JeeNiNe's rocking a very interesting build here. It's a regen tank build with an ultra greatsword, not the kind of build you typically see in the tournament. And here a throwing bomb actually signals the start of the fight. And so JeeNiNe starts with Bountiful Light and then the Filianor Chime weapon art. And it looks like, I believe that's a Lothric Knight ultra greatsword. He's got a Blessed Cestus. The sword is blessed as well. And I think by my calculation, the total regen that he's getting when he's got Sun Princess equipped, it's like 17 HP a second. You just saw the swap to Sun Princess there. It's unbelievable. I mean, he's getting like 1,000 HP regenerated every minute that all those buffs are up and active. And so here you actually see he swaps back to Life Ring because he's generating so much health. That way he increases the cap of his total health here. And then back to Sun Princess again. So the strategy that he's employing here, I believe, is the strategy that he's outlined in his How to Fight with an Ultra Greatsword build or video. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. The strategy normally consists of essentially rolling a lot and then optionally mixing up either rolling attacks, because this has the awesome poke roll attack, mixing up the rolling attacks or standing R1s. You can see there his opponent ended up trading with him. I think he's traded a total of twice at this point, which is essentially all that it takes. And here you can see JeeNiNe's gone with the Corvian knife. And in slow motion, you can see something that I've long suspected, which is I don't think most players can actually reaction roll this. Every time I see one of these guys bring out a Corvian Great Knife, everyone seems to panic roll in response. So I don't think people are actually able to reaction roll that, though I'd be curious to hear if somebody thinks differently. And now for the finisher, he brings out the Avalon with the exploding bolts and just kind of strafes, and I think that's almost impossible to avoid. So I may have mentioned it earlier. I apologize. I don't know who these other players are, or I would give you a bit more info about them, at least what I know of them. Obviously, you saw JeeNiNe there resetting his rings before he black crystalled out, and here we go into the second round. The regen on this, I just cannot get over how strong it is. And his opponent here seems to be using a mixture of the Lothric Holy Sword and the Ring Knight Straight Sword. And I assume the Lothric Holy Sword is for the weapon art. Which probably makes sense against an Ultra where you're trying to stay away from him. And his opponent here actually does a pretty good job of staying away and avoiding the rolling attack versus standing R1 mix up here. And I noticed JeeNiNe likes to go for these charged R2s, similar to the way he does with the Greatsword, but I don't know that he's able to actually get anybody with the attack. You see here, he's unlocked, and I think he actually, he kind of goes for a pivot right there, which is pretty difficult to do with an Ultra, but the fact that he's even attempting it says something about him. And here, this was kind of interesting. So he gets hit with two R1s, and it looks like he, you can call it a panic roll or anticipatory roll, but he rolls out without looking to see if maybe his opponent will go with the R2 roll catch. But going for the R2 roll catch from his opponent would be really dangerous, because if JeeNiNe reads it and instead trades with him, his opponent's going to lose all of his health. So it's probably a pretty safe move for JeeNiNe in that situation. And his opponent, again, doing a good job reading the mix-up between the rolling attacks and the standing R1s. In a minute, we'll see somebody who doesn't do nearly as good a job. Man, that Corvian knife, that pressure is just crazy. I actually asked JeeNiNe why he didn't go for more rolling attacks in this first clip, and I don't really remember the details of his answer. I'll have to go back and take another look at that. But once again, JeeNiNe only has to trade a couple times with that weapon. I think he's doing over 800 points of damage on each R1 combo. And he breaks out the Avalon. Man, that is just brutal. So I think these fights must have been best of 3 because I think it just took him 2 wins. Then he's got a new opponent here. In this case, you're going to see where he does, in my view, I think he does a better job of the rolling and standing R1 mix-up game. And watch how fast his health regenerates here. Holy cow. And there you can see, there he went for a rolling attack, but he got interrupted by the straight sword. But he's already gotten his opponent once with the mix-up. Good reaction there. Back over to the life ring for the regeneration. The charge star 2 there may have been a mistake. And there his opponent read the rolling attack and rolled and then got caught by the standing R1. And that was impressive. That was a nice parry. He actually switched to one-handing it. In some sense, I'm surprised his opponent didn't anticipate it, but I'm not sure that you can play parry games at this level. It seems to me like maybe in the last 6 months or so, you've seen parries more often in duels than ever before. And I always thought that you need to think about it at the margin. The answer is not no parries, but it's also you don't want to use too many. You need to use the appropriate amount. If nobody ever parries, then nobody expects it. And parrying every now and then can be a smart idea. And here you can see his opponent's not faring well in the guessing game of the rolling R1 versus standing R1. He's already below half health. And I wonder if he got the Corvian in an attempt to try to space out JeeNiNe's ultra great weapon. I'm not really sure what the weapon selection, what he was thinking there. And there are just 4 or 5 wrong guesses in a row, and that fight was over quickly. When I used to duel a lot at Pontiff, I used to run into guys occasionally that use that strategy with ultras. And man, that used to be frustrating though. A lot of times if I had my straight sword and parry shield, they would fall victim to a certain pattern, and eventually I'd be able to get a parry and one-shot them. But obviously a player like JeeNiNe is going to be too smart for that type of strategy to be very effective. This was interesting here because obviously he's confronting a mage, and so he goes for the blue bug pellets to try to cut down on the magic damage. I don't know if you all have fought a skilled mage that uses the homing soul mass build, but it can be really frustrating to try to fight. And in fact, JeeNiNe has another video about how to fight mages. And if I recall correctly, on the question of how to approach a mage when they've got homing soul mass up, his answer is essentially you can't. But he does in this video, which makes me think that maybe that's the difference with the ultras. That with the ultra, because you have poise on your attacks, you can actually poise through the homing soul mass and actually get the mage through homing soul mass. He's been able to do that a couple times already. Once, I think, with a rolling attack, once with a running attack, and maybe another attack that I missed. There's another rolling attack. He's doing an excellent job of putting pressure on this mage, and there he finishes the fight. He made that look easy, but let me tell you, fighting a skilled mage like that is not easy. Skitter actually has a build like that I fought a couple times, and I was ready to go find out where he lived. It was so annoying to fight. It is one of my least favorite builds to try to fight against. You know, if you're fighting JeeNiNe in this situation, you've just got to be thinking about that constant regen going on in the background. Like, I almost wonder if it wouldn't be a better strategy to just run away from him for the first minute while he's got Bountiful Light and the Filianor Chime weapon art up. I mean, every 6 to 7 seconds, he's generated 100 HP worth of health. Like, it's very, very difficult to win a fight in that sort of situation. I mean, hell, if I had that kind of regen up, I would maybe do okay in a fight like this against a tryhard. Probably not win, but I would do okay. I mean, you just can't afford to spot a good player like JeeNiNe, that much health. I'm pretty sure a lot of the tournaments actually have no regen rules, and maybe this is why, I don't know. His opponent's doing about as good a job as he possibly can at trying to keep JeeNiNe at bay, trying to avoid the rolling and standing R1 mix-up game. I think the dagger's helping him there with the quick step. You have so few vulnerable frames that even if you guess wrong, you've still got a pretty reasonable chance at escaping. I think where the mage is getting into trouble is when he's casting. And you see right there, he just narrowly avoided getting hit. So much pressure from this build, and I would have never ever guessed that a build like this would be effective in a tournament, but JeeNiNe has definitely proven me wrong. So his last opponent here, so there's a total of 4 opponents. This is the 4th and final opponent. Has a very interesting build, and I suspect it's a build that he put together specifically to counteract what JeeNiNe was doing. I mean, I imagine they all can kind of see the other fights that are going on, and so they know the fight that's upcoming. And with a better weapon, that probably would have been a grab. Like, you'll see a couple times here, he gets what would be grabs with smaller weapons, almost certainly with a rapier, but the ultra weapons are so much slower, and so if your opponent is wise to you trying to get a backstab, and as long as they don't keep swinging, they can almost always escape. But his opponent here does finally get caught up by the pivot BS there from JeeNiNe. Kind of curious what he was thinking with that weapon art there. It's so slow and so telegraphed, and he ended up blowing all of his stamina. I don't know, maybe he thought he had a strong read against his opponent, and his opponent was going to attack, and that would enable him to hyper armor through it. But his opponent, he has a Demon's Great Axe and the Demon Fist, which means that if JeeNiNe tries his rolling R1 shenanigans, his opponent can actually poise through it and punish his attacks. And so he's got to be a bit more circumspect than he has been so far. So you see him, he's not really going for many rolling R1s because he doesn't want to lose a trade. And it's just sort of interesting, the rock, paper, scissors nature of Dark Souls fighting games. and these matchups that, you know, a demon great axe you would not think of as a build that you would want to take into a tournament. But given what JeeNiNe's using, it makes perfect sense. And JeeNiNe's got a harp here. Kind of curious why he wouldn't have used the murky instead. I'm not sure what the trade-offs are between the harp and the murky, but that was a great read there with the weapon art because he gets so much poise on that. He's able to poise right through the dagger. Again, I apologize. I don't know who his opponents are, but I would say of all of his opponents, this player fares the best, and not just by a little bit, by a considerable margin. And it makes me wonder how much of an advantage it is to fight somebody like this later in the tournament when you can get a look at what they're doing. But obviously also the later you are in a tournament, that means the other player had to pass through a gauntlet of other players too, and so they're likely to be the more skilled of all the opponents. So you can see there's a lot of neutral dancing here. Neither player wants to really commit to an attack. And it looks like the Demon Fist has that same running, I'm guessing L1, that the Cestus has, which comes out very, very quickly. I mean, both these players are using weapons that are difficult to reaction roll, and that was really clever. The hard swap, I know players sometimes get me like that. I'm so in tune to the weapons that they have that I'm not even thinking about the possibility of another weapon coming out. And you can see he almost got JeeNiNe with it. So his opponent's really doing good work to him. That was a great rolling attack, but JeeNiNe still got good regen going. I think at this point probably Bountiful Light and the Filianor are canceled, and that was interesting there. He had enough space to go for the weapon art, the Filianor and Bountiful Light. His opponent didn't come in to challenge it at all, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe he saw the first one go off and thought, well, it's too late to do anything, and didn't realize maybe that JeeNiNe actually had two regen miracles that he could cast, both Bountiful Light and the Filianor weapon art. That's the only explanation I can come up with. But that's huge. That is an enormous tide turner here, because up until now, JeeNiNe's opponent had him at very low health. He was at probably 25% of his health. But now the tenor of the fight is completely changed, and you can see he's just got him here in stun lock hell with the dagger. It's amazing what a difference that regen made. I mean, this was a fight that JeeNiNe looked like he was surely on his way to losing, but the brassy use of the miracle mid-fight has completely changed the outcome of this match. Very well played. So for this last round, against this last opponent, there's actually 3 fights rather than 2, and I'm presuming that's because it was best of 5. But across this entire tournament, JeeNiNe did not lose a single match, which is pretty unreal. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. I just don't know if people were unaccustomed to fighting an Ultra Greatsword build, if the rules of this tournament were different, or exactly what happened. But there you see his opponent read the rolling R1 and was able to really punish it. But at the same time, because of JeeNiNe's regen, just in the time that I've described what happened, the damage has almost been completely erased. Like, I've got to think that a smarter strategy might be just to run away. And you can see there he was able to kind of pivot around his running attack and stab him in the back. Then the hard swap back. But no matter how well you fight against him with that much regen going, I just don't see the percentage in fighting him directly. And I'm also kind of curious why his opponents didn't switch up to some sort of regen build themselves. But again, there could be rules governing the tournament where your builds have to be set in advance. Obviously not the weapons, or at least I wouldn't think, but the underlying build itself, like the stat allocation, may have to be set up. And so none of these players may have been able to take advantage of regen the way that JeeNiNe is. He's really doing a great job, though. You can see when JeeNiNe's running, when JeeNiNe's rolling, he's trying to run away. And I think he's doing that so that he doesn't have to confront the decision of whether to roll or whether to stand his ground and hope that JeeNine's not going for a rolling attack. So one thing actually that I've been learning as I fight some of these better players is that they're all very, very good at spacing attacks rather than rolling them. In fact, it's one thing that we'll talk about in the next video where we'll get to see a lot of it, but spacing attacks rather than rolling is so much more advantageous because you can whiff punish, and rolling, as good as rolling is in Dark Souls 3, it's not perfect. And there's another punish. It's not perfect, and your opponent always knows exactly where you're going to be at the end of your roll. That makes it dangerous against a good player. Again, the what I would call panic rolling or anticipatory rolling or defensive rolling against the Corvian Great Knife, you just see, I've got to think again that people just cannot reaction roll that attack, or they would be. This is getting good pressure on JeeNiNe here. But he's got that Blessed Harp, he's got the Blessed Cestus, and I believe he's got the Sun Princess ring going. And I think that's probably around 6 HP per second of healing, which isn't awesome, but it's still enough to really put pressure on your opponent. And it means JeeNiNe can kind of take a more passive and wait and see approach and know that he's getting tons of regen every moment. He's just standing there without being attacked. And that's got to get inside your opponent's head as well. Oh man, he just barely interrupted that attack before it started. Another couple of frames, and I think he would have gotten into the hyper armor phase of that weapon art. These players are also all really, really good at actively managing their rings and weapons during a fight. That's something actually I personally have just started trying to get better at. It's interesting too in this situation, JeeNiNe busted out the Avalon rather than just as a complete finisher. He's using it to chip away at the last bits of health of his opponent, and I suspect he's doing that so he doesn't inadvertently risk a trade with the dagger into his opponent's hyper armor. Again, just incredibly well played by both players. Okay, so this brings us to the third fight of the fourth round. So as you've probably already gathered from the things that I said earlier, I believe JeeNiNe does win this fight again to go perfect. So he won against the first 3 opponents, a total of 6 fights, and then 3 fights against his last opponent. And it looks like his opponent has changed up his armor here. I don't know if that was a poise consideration or if that was a defense consideration. And I also noticed JeeNiNe has switched up to his claymore, lightning infused in this case, I believe, rather than blessed. I know like the Lothric Knight Ultra Great Sword is one of the few weapons in the game that actually does well blessed. I think the Dragon Slayer Axe is another one, but I believe those are really the only 2. Otherwise, blessed weapons take a big damage hit. It had to be an interesting consideration to decide whether the extra regen on the Claymore was worth it blessed, and that was a really nice backstab. Whether the regen was worth the damage trade-off, and obviously he concluded that it was not, that he'd be better off with the lightning infusion. That R2 is so dangerous there, and you can see the R1 he just did unlocked up close to the player. The idea there, I believe, is that the pommel of the Claymore actually has a hitbox, and it comes out very quickly. So if your opponent is trying to reaction roll you, as his opponent surely is, it can throw off your timing, and you can get put in stun lock much earlier than you would expect. And then the cheeky hard swap over to the Ultra Great Sword in an attempt to throw his opponent off. And he actually had time there to get the R2 out and still roll out to avoid trading with the final phase of the weapon art there, the Demon Fist, which is quite interesting. Good pressure from his opponent right now. He's really getting in JeeNiNe's face, roll catching him, throwing out the weapon art to keep him honest so that he doesn't attempt to go for the rolling R1s. I think it's fair to say that the regen was probably the differentiating factor in these fights. Like if I think through these fights, I suspect JeeNiNe would have lost at least 2 of these fights were it not for the regen. The regen was obviously a critical part of the build. I don't think he would have tried the ultra weapon without the regen. The neutral play is really interesting to watch too. I know others have pointed out that Dark Souls combat doesn't really offer a lot of good gameplay out in neutral, a lot of good initializers, although with a dagger that's about as good a neutral initiator as you could possibly want. Oh, that's just wicked. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for checking in. Take care now.